Computer. All right, guys. I really appreciate y'all. Scott sends out a great big thanks. Our fund drive has succeeded. We've come to the end of asking y'all for money. That does not mean you can stop thinking about sending us money. I mean, like, we'll take your money, like, whatever. Like, but no, thank you very much for your cooperation and keeping us going. Really appreciate that. At the Libertarian Institute, we all work very hard trying to get y'all, keep y'all informed to the best of our abilities. We're a bunch of hooligans trying to keep things together and give news and information to the best of our abilities. So we really do appreciate everything that y'all do for us. It's wonderful, and thank y'all for listening to the show. I can't say enough about how great y'all make me feel um, doing as I continue this show. It'll be 7 years this year. I'll be doing this show. That's wild. Jeez. Maybe I need to look for a new job or something. Just playing. Um, and our sponsor, as always, Alp. Alp is the best nicotine pouches out there. And trust me, I know because UPS screwed up my delivery. And so I'm running around just putting together different like varieties of nicotine pouches just to keep myself going until I can recover my Alp package that UPS jacked up. And so they, okay, all my mail comes to a P.O. box. They put my package on some dude's porch. Like, it's obviously not a P.O. box, not even in the same zip code. I do not know what is going on with UPS. They've done this to my wife before too, but that's not the point because I have been rogue, Zen, on all of them, just trying to hold on and get until I can get my Alp, and they're terrible. They are terrible. I was like, how did I how did I use on for as long as I did before I started using Alp? And it's just they're not good. They're not near as good as Alp. Alp is the best nicotine pouch out there. After 28 years of smoking, I quit smoking last year, and the nicotine pouches have been just a godsend. They really help take the edge off whenever I'm having one of those days where I just like I need some nicotine, you know. And so Alp is by far the best nicotine pouch out there. It comes in 9, 6, and 3 milligram pouches. You got the wintergreen, you got the peppermint. I can't remember what the other. I think the other flavor is like coffee or something like that. But I like the wintergreen. The wintergreen's my flavor. Um, and yeah, man, 28 years of smoking, I couldn't even walk like from from here to the end of my driveway, like 800 feet, um, without getting short of breath. It had just become a hindrance on my life. I wasn't able to garden the way I enjoy going out and working in the yard and gardening. I wasn't able to do that type of stuff, cutting trees and stuff like that. It was just a big hindrance on me. And now I feel great. I am no longer short of breath at all times. I've kind of 28 years of smoking. I've jacked up the bone structure in my jaw, but we're in the process of getting all that taken care of. That's not going to be cheap. That's going to be expensive to get done. But if you're smoking, just know that get away from it as fast as possible because it is going to affect your life. Even if you don't notice the effects now, it will affect you in the future going forward. Don't be like me. Quit as soon as possible. And to turn it out if you need nicotine. It's the best. There's no tobacco involved. It's not like it's just such a great product. And all the people at Alp have been so wonderful in communicating with me about this lost package and giving me the information I need to help recover it. Um, Hopefully, I should get it here in the next couple of days, depending on UPS dragging their ass. It's not the people at Alp that screwed this up, it's people at UPS screwed this up. Alp, they had an issue up in the Northeast, I guess, like a couple of weeks ago when my order was being processed, where the USPS was overly strained for whatever reason. And so instead of postponing shipping out the product, Alp decided to utilize UPS for some of their customers, and UPS apparently has trouble finding the post office. So there's that. So it's definitely not Alp's problem. The product's amazing. I can't say enough good things about it. You'll thank me. Just and and your lungs will thank you. Switch over from smoking to Alp. If you dip, go to Alp. Get away from the tobacco products, all that cancerous material that you're injecting into your body. Get away from it. Utilize Alp. And hey, there's a link in the description below. Get 10% off your order. You can set it to recurring orders. If you spend $70 or more, free shipping. So jump down in the description, utilize my code, and get 10% off your order of Alp, and it'll be sent out to you today. So there you go. Now we're just waiting on our guests. We got Rachel Nelson from the Libertarian Institute coming on. We're doing. I'm working to do some different stuff with the guys from the Libertarian Institute. Have them on my podcast a little bit more often. So we're going to rotate through these guys and get them on here. And you're going to love the lineup we got. So stay tuned. Rachel Nelson. You won't even know I'm gone. But maybe like last week, I'll put a hat on or something just to kind of switch it up and kind of throw you for a curveball. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe a Lone Ranger mask. I have a Lone Ranger mask. I haven't worn it in a long time, so I don't know. All right, stay tuned. All right, here she is, Miss Rachel Nelson. What's up?
Not much. What's up with you? Just hanging out on this Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hi, man. I had a long weekend. So since part of the reason I had to ask you last minute and you bailed me out and I love it. Thank you so much for that.
Of course.
So last year my store closed that I drove for, and the store was 5 minutes away from my house. So I would go to work. I'd get off work at like 2:30 in the afternoon. I'd come home. I could record. I could do whatever I wanted all night long, and then get up and go to work the next morning at 6:30. But now, since the store closed, I transferred to the DC, the distribution center, like that's an hour and 20 minutes from my house. So I work 4 days a week. And my boss is terrible about putting out the schedule ahead of time. So a lot of times I don't know what I'm working the next week until Friday. Like, and so making the plans like I used to when I worked at the store here close by, it's a lot more difficult now. And so I really appreciate you jumping in, bailing me out. I was like, oh, this is gonna suck because I haven't done a solo episode in forever. I used to do them whenever I was over the road, and because at the end of the day I'd sit in the back in the bunk and I would just like research different topics and stuff like that. But I don't do that near as much as I used to back when I was over the road, because now I get home and I have responsibilities, I have things I got to take care of. And so it's like, in some ways it was easier being over the road, but I like my wife too much to leave again. So
Yeah, well, it was you posted in the group and said if anybody wanted to come on, and I thought, I enjoy this kind of stuff. I like talking with people. I want to get to know more of us at the Institute on more than just a work type level. So I was excited. I was like, you know what? I'm open. If you want to give it a go, let's go together. Let's talk about it and see what we come up with. So I was kind of excited about the opportunity to just jump in and go for it.
yeah, damn Skippy, man. I love it. So so we were talking, all right, let's start there. We were talking before we started recording about some of the plans that you have for the Institute. So introduce the listeners to who you are, what you do at the Institute, and kind of what we're looking at, like how we're looking at expanding the opportunities at the Institute.
So my name's Rachel Nelson, for those of you that are like brand new to all this. And I started working at the Institute actually a year ago. This January would be a year. And I was brought on as the outreach coordinator. So basically, The way Scott kind of explained it is I am pretty good at networking and talking with people. I make friends everywhere I go. You can ask anybody that knows me. I'll come out of the bathroom and be like, oh, yeah, I talked to this really nice lady at the sink. And it's just something I've done since I was little. Like, it drives my husband, who is super introverted, crazy because we'll go to a concert and I'll come out laughing with somebody. He's like, where did you pick this person up? And I'm like, oh, we were in line. And so it's just something I've done. And so he said he wanted me to come and bridge the gap between the institute, who kind of likes to read and do their details in their articles and those sorts of things, which is done so beautifully and so well, and kind of the networking aspect. So over the last year, I've been working on heavily on social media, trying to reintroduce the podcasts, the books, the authors, the talent we have. I've been doing biographies and sending things out with headshots and all that kind of stuff, trying to reintroduce the people behind all of that information that comes out. We have so much amazing information and books and podcasts and daily articles that talk about what's going on in massive detail, but we also have some really cool people at the Institute.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to highlight that now. I'm trying to bring who we are as people behind the books, the articles, and behind these screens and say, hey, when we're at home, we like to read these books, listen to these songs, watch these movies. We have these things in common with you. So that's kind of my next year plan, is to highlight us as people individually.
Yeah, and I think it's so important and so interesting, and that's what I try to do with the podcast whenever I have people on, and I know that they've written this great book or they've written this amazing article and they've dug deep into all these different subjects, and I just try to bring out that like the person that's behind it all, and kind of let people like, oh, this is the why he thinks about these things this way, and really dive into who that person is just on a conversational level. Like I would be sitting down having a conversation with you on my front porch. It's exactly the same way I deal with the podcast. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, and when I first started working with everybody, and I said, okay, give me an idea before we switched from what we were using Skype, and I said, let's try to get onto Signal or some other chatting area, and we moved from there. I said, give me some ideas of these people. And when I talked to Scott, he had these great stories about these times you guys talked that weren't recorded, or about these times you've traveled on the road, or all these little conventions and times you crossed paths. And it was really interesting to see him talk about and get excited about each individual person instead of this amazing article, which we talk about all the time. And I don't want to degrade the massive amount of amazing work, but the people behind it are such amazing fun people. I just did a show with Keith a week or two ago and found out we cross over on a ton of musical interests, and he doesn't really read to relax. Mr. Keith, who reads all the time, it's basically business and work for him. So it was interesting to find out he likes trashy reality TV to cool off. Like, these are things that you wouldn't necessarily know when we're just talking about work. And I love that we're getting to know each other that way. So I'm trying to get a highlight of people, maybe get a more regular feel of us getting together and doing just chill, no ties, no crazy suits, no preset notes, just let's chat. And we'll probably naturally fall into some of our own political things or life things because that's everywhere. But the way we look at it can be different when we're not necessarily trying to impress a crowd of people.
Yeah, and that's something that bothers me constantly, is how much politics interferes with life nowadays. I grew up, I mean, I was a teenager in the 90s, like politics, like we never even thought of politics. Like it was like, we're going to go out, we're going to party, we're going to play sports, we're just going to chill and hang out. And then it was like I woke up one day and I'm looking around and I'm like, God, everything's so political. I guess I need to figure out what the hell's going on here. So I started reading, and that's how I kind of like stumbled into libertarianism. And I mean, I stopped calling myself a libertarian in 2019, but it's not because I disagree a lot with libertarians. It's because Tucker Carlson called Hillary Clinton's foreign policy libertarian foreign policy. And I was like, well, that's what mainstream media says libertarian is. I don't want that label on me. And then I've stumbled into, I became Orthodox here in the last few years, and Orthodox Christian. And so I kind of, the way I view things is more from that Orthodox perspective than it is so much from the libertarian perspective, even though there's a lot of overlap with the way libertarians look at things. But one of the big issues I have with any ideology, especially right now when you're looking at the mode of the country, I think ideologies are the wrong way to look at everything that's happening. I was texting with you earlier, and Scott Adams had mentioned that point about it's like two factions looking at the same TV screen watching two different movies. And it's more about worldview nowadays than it is about ideology. And so I look around and I'm like, yeah, libertarians are right about, this aspect or that aspect or this aspect. But what they fail to talk about is the worldview that puts the left in this kind of like lunatic fringe over here. And it's like, the only people I really have anything in common with are on the right. Like, I don't have anything in common with those people on the left.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with perspective. And one of the things that I bring up, so just a little, I grew up in Colorado for a while, and then I lived for 20 years in Washington State, Western Washington. So within about an hour and a half of Seattle. So I've had an interesting different look, and now I'm in Nebraska. So you can go from different extremes all through there. I was a young kid in the 90s, so I grew up also playing in the dirt and rolling around, and none of this seemed to matter until 9/11 for me. That's when it really kind of went, holy crap, something else is going on here. That's a whole nother crazy story, but that's kind of where it broke for me. But I think when it goes to looking at the same screen, two different movies, I think a lot of that has to do with perspective too, and the way that the area you're in. So something I always saw with Washington and then moving to here is the perspective. We have two very different sides. Like you said, what puts the far left way out in that fringy, crazy far left corner? The type of people who flood to the areas that become those hotbeds are because the resources are plentiful and the life is easier. So you automatically have people who are going to be more likely to rely on government support. They're going to not be as open-minded and as hardworking. You have that sort of thing, but they're going to be staring at that same screen as somebody who lives in an environment who has to deal with sub-temperatures that drop down into the negatives, people who deal with hot, horrible weathers in the summer, dry environments. They have to figure out how to make everything grow and work. Those same people are going to do the same sort of activities and things as those far crazy lefties, and they're going to be the rights, if you want to call them that. You have the crazy right guys too, because they're doing that, but the environment they're in shapes what they're looking at on that screen. It's all about the perspective. And that's where we're getting that huge divide, is we have a very vast country with very different resources across it. And the people who flood to these areas who are willing to put up with the hardships of others is why we have these pockets of different perspectives and such radical differences on each side of the country, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the things that drove me crazy was growing up in the 90s. It was like, I guess I felt like looking back on it now, it feels like we had hit the epitome of a colorblind society where nobody cared about race or any of that stuff. We didn't talk about that stuff. We would BS with people. We'd call each other names. We'd say stupid shit, but it was all jokes. It was all funny. It was just to have fun, and we would just bullshit. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, I turn on the television. I hear these people going, "Everybody in this country is racist," and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? What reality are you living in? And when you live like blue collar, like I have my entire life, like you don't give a shit what color somebody is. You don't care what their sexuality is. You really don't. You don't think about those things. Are you Number one, are you competent enough to keep us from dying while we're doing this very difficult job? That's the number one thing that I care about. I do not care. Like, if you're picking up a 30,000 pound bar and laying it on the back of my truck, on my trailer, I want to know you're not going to drop that damn thing on my head. That's all I care about, you know? And so, like, so growing up in that kind of atmosphere, it never mattered. I remember my dad um worked with a guy, and I'm not going to say the guy's name, obviously, but he worked with this guy in the lumber industry, and the guy was homosexual. And I remember asking, I was in high school. I was kind of like a crude, crass, not like I'm any better now, but I was much worse then. And I was like, yeah, so isn't he like a faggot or something? And my dad's like, I don't give a shit what he is. He works harder than anybody else at that lumber yard. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like he's like, I
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah, so I worked in customer service and went to college on the Air Force Base where you had lots of different people coming in and out and did that sort of stuff. So I dealt with different countries, different ideologies.
Mm,
So that sort of thing was never new to me. And then I actually met my husband in high school and he worked at the port in Tacoma. So he was a night shift port worker. So if you want to talk about crude, crass group of
right.
just hard ass guys who don't give a shit, that is the group I spent my
Hmm.
college years with. And they didn't give a shit what you did as long as you worked hard, you held your own, and you didn't give a shit when they said, get down in that water. We know it's cold. You got to do it. And so
Right.
I think that really for me is how I kind of measure people. I don't care what you do in your bedroom as long as it's consensual. I don't give a shit what you look like. You go do you. I'm covered in tattoos. That doesn't change what I can do any means at all. So I agree. I think the measure of a person is more what they do than all the other pieces. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that that's the reality people are using anymore. I like you and I both were 90s kids. I mean I was born in 1990, so I was
Mm,
fairly young in the
right.
early 90s, but I grew up in the same feel of I didn't even think about it. I remember being quite a bit older when it even really struck me that I had to like defend the fact that I had friends that were of different color, of different sexual orientation. Like there was a day where people attacked me about it, and I was like, wait a minute, why do I have to list off people that are in this category to make myself okay by you? When did this become a natural, normal thing? Why do I have to ask one of my best friends to come forward and be like, no, I promise, Rachel's not racist. Look at me. I'm clearly not white. Like, when did this become something that was normal? Because I'm raising children in a world where that has to be a reality when I didn't even think about it till I was probably I don't know, late teens, early 20s before I was really hit with that sort of blatant, I don't want to say racism, that gives too much power to it, just that blatant, idiotic idea of we have
Mm.
to back that instead of just measuring a person by their worth.
Yeah, when I guess it was it was right around like it was right around the time that Trump was elected the first time. I guess it was 2015, 2016. And suddenly everybody was racist. And I was like, what the hell
Yeah.
are y'all talking about? Like,
Yep.
like it was just like in things that we used to just we would bullshit about. We would just hang out and talk shit and just trash talk. And it was just those normal everyday conversations that we would have joking around with each other. Suddenly you weren't allowed to say it anymore. And it was like yesterday it was fine. Yesterday it was
Yeah.
hilarious. And now I can't say it. Like you're full of shit. And you got to think at that time I was already like so I was already 32, 33 years old at the time. So I'm like, wait a minute. Like my entire life has been like lived a certain way and we just kind of like nothing's taken like super seriously. And suddenly now some freaking 25-year-old graduates from Harvard and wants to tell us that that like the way I live my life is a racist, bigoted, and I'm like, you're so full of shit. You don't know anything about the way that I grew up. You don't know anything about the people I grew up around. You don't have any clue. I remember living in like the Oak Cliff area whenever I was a kid. And Oak Cliff is near Dallas. I don't remember that actual area. We didn't actually live in Oak Cliff, but it was somewhere close to Oak Cliff. And it's a really like gang riddled, heavy gang presence area of Dallas. It's known as a rough area, kind of like the Fifth Ward would be in Houston. And there was I had friends that were like Hispanic and black, and we would go out and we would be skateboarding together. And there was like these skinhead types that hung around that area, and they would pick on me more than they would pick on them because I was the race traitor, and it was
Yeah.
like, okay, like whatever. Like I never even considered it. It was like never even a thought in my head. Kids don't care about that type of stuff. And the only reason kids start caring about that type of stuff is because their parents or some form of authority is pounding it into their skull, right? And this is what has been so hard for people to accept about like the kids being trans and this, it's like they don't know. He's like, I never accepted the argument that people are born gay. I'm like, no, you're born. That's it. You're born. You're not sexual. Like a baby is not a sexual thing. Like, and if you're
It has to
looking at a
figure it out.
right, and if you're looking at a child as something sexual, then there's something wrong with you. Like,
That's a whole nother conversation that you need to have with yourself, because when your children are born, we can sit there and discuss all day what genes, what traits, whatever makes it in the end. They have to figure out what they are and who they are. That doesn't have to do with anything other than the fact that when they're born, if you look at a baby, they are survival. That's it. They're
right.
not really
Yeah.
formed outside of eat, sleep, shit.
That's
That's
it.
all they do for quite a while. Like they're not thinking about anything else for a while. It's survival. And then when they start to figure out who they are, then you start to watch them mold into their person. And if you're doing it the way that I personally would say is the correct way, you still aren't going to be pushing any of those sorts of things. They're kids. Let them go out and eat dirt. Let them throw rocks.
Yeah.
Your son wants to play with a Barbie doll because it likes their hair, fine. If your daughter wants to go out and get a big paintball gun, all for it. Go for it. It doesn't mean anything. Let them explore and see what they love. And then you know what? If there's a problem, we'll handle it. But most of the time, a child is going to figure out their path way before there's a major issue, as long as everybody just lets them be a kid.
Oh,
Just let them
they
breathe.
would have they would have tried to staple a dick onto my mom. She was a big tomboy back in the day. She liked playing baseball and football and all that crap when she was young, and it's like I remember when my kids were in high school, my oldest were over at my house visiting me, and my daughter said, "Dad, I have something to tell you." And I was like, "What's that?" And she goes, "I'm bi." I'm like, "Yeah, well, me too. If I can't get it for free, I'll buy it." And then she just laughed, and it was like, all right, she was like 13, 14 years old. Like, you don't know, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then a few minutes later it goes, my son's like, my oldest son, he's sitting there laughing. He's like 15, 16 at the time. And he goes, well, I'm pansexual. And I was like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Like you're attracted to Peter Pan? Like, I don't understand what they're talking about here. And he explains it to me, and I'm like, shut up. You don't know what the fuck you are. It's
Like
just like
just let
I
yourself
don't have to
be.
I don't have to sit there and like encourage you to be retarded. I could just be like, shut up, dude. And you know what? They're perfectly heterosexual people. They're in their 20s now, and they're perfectly heterosexual. My daughter has a daughter. I have a granddaughter, and everything's fine. But it's just like you don't have to entertain every delusional comment that comes out of a child's mouth. When I was 15, I certainly didn't want to be tied to the shit I was saying.
Yeah. That's just it. Like I always tell people when they ask me, like, what would you do? How would you handle it? You have two sons. And I definitely was definitely, if we want to talk about born to do something, I was born to have boys. I don't know what I would have done with a girl. I know I would have been fine, but I am much easier. Boys were a very easy stride for me. I'm the same way.
Mm,
It was easy to be able to do sports and mud and dirt bikes and paintballs, and all that is very
mm,
easy for me. So that was good. And I was, what are you going to do? You have 50-50 chance. And I'm like, if they get to be adults and that's their path and they feel that that's where they're going to find happiness and love and peace and all, but by all means, I support them as adults to make that decision.
right.
What I'm not going to do, worry about that. What I'm
Yeah.
going to do is support whatever. My youngest was going to be Bigfoot, grow hair all over and live in the woods until about a year ago. And you know what I said? You do that, buddy, because you know what?
Have
He
fun.
was 5, 6 years old. You want to live in the woods as Bigfoot? You know what? Some days I agree. Let's go. Like, I wasn't going out and buying hair and gluing it to his body and teaching him how to grunt in the woods. I was like, dude, you be Bigfoot if that's what your passion is. Now he wants to be a zoologist. He wants to study things like crypto creatures. Like that became a passion.
Mm,
I fed the passion and now he's growing into it. He doesn't want to be Bigfoot. He loves Bigfoot. There's two different things between
right.
supporting a passion and a dream and aiding a delusion. There's two
Mm,
very different things
hmm.
here. My husband wanted to be a fire truck when he was younger. It's in his baby book. He's not a fire truck. Like, he's almost 40. No fire trucks. Like it's just not how it goes. But
Yeah.
there's no reason to stifle it, but there's no reason to bend over backwards to try to force it. So I think that it's important to let them explore their dreams, explore what might make them happy. Who knows? We're still young enough. You want to dye your hair neon pink and go to school and see how that goes over? You know, a class of your peers and the way you decide to carry yourself will decide if your hair stays pink. And that's something
Right.
you're going to have to battle. I will be here to support you as mom at home, but
Hmm.
you can't, like I said, I'm not gluing hair on him to be Bigfoot. I'm giving him the ability to figure
How
out what that
dare you?
passion leads to.
How dare you? You're a terrible
Yeah,
mother. You
right.
have to encourage him. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, yeah, and you also think about it like boys, especially if they have like a healthy relationship with their parents, with their mother, they always, I want to marry my mom when I get older. That's you don't, but you don't hold them to that. That's not in a
No.
proposal. Like it's like it's just weird, like Bates Motel type behaviorism that and it's so pathologized to just encourage. You just have to approve of everything, and it's like, no, I don't. I can make fun of you, and that's all I ever did with my kids. When they would say something like that, I would just make fun of them, and we'd laugh about it, and it would be over. My youngest son was at my house a few weeks ago, and we were messing around with something, and he said something, and I looked at my wife and I said, "That's the gayest thing I've ever heard in my life." And he starts laughing, and he told my wife, he goes, "You know why I'm not gay?" My wife goes, "No, why?" And he goes, "Because my dad said if I ever told him I was gay, he would never speak to me again." And we're all laughing about it and just joking around. And I look at my wife and I said, "You notice I haven't talked to him since he said that stupid ass thing he said a while ago." And he just fell out of the chair laughing because he was like, obviously we're just busting balls here. This is just men
Yeah.
being men, just having a good time. And you know what we did that night? We went and got a case of beer and sat out on the porch and drank beer and just bullshitted all night long. And that's it. Like, it was no big deal. It's not a big deal. Like, you can have fun and not take everything so seriously, but it's this this culture, wherever this has come from. I think your explanation about like it being like a weaker culture, easier lives, maybe that has a lot to do with it. But they pathologize this stuff and they take it so seriously, and it's like it's not that serious. It's like, have you ever? It's like you've never struggled to eat a meal. And
Yeah.
so it's like I'm in such a good spot. Like, I remember, I've told the story several times, but I remember like when I was a kid, my mom would go days without eating because we didn't have the money. We lived on peanut butter and jelly and oatmeal for like years. That's all we could afford to eat. So it's like now I'm like, my wife said something to me the other day, and I was like, she's from South Africa. So she was raised, when she was born, South Africa was first world, but as she grew up, the currency diminished and it became a
Yeah.
third world country. And so she looks at me, she goes, "I'm so glad we're rich." And I was like, "We're not rich. Like, what are you talking about?" She goes, "We can eat whatever we want, whenever we want. We're rich." And I was like, huh. I never thought about it like that. But
Perspective.
that's just the life she came from, the world that she came from. You were expected to suffer, and suffering is such a foreign concept to Americans nowadays. I mean, joining the Orthodox Church, going through Lent like we're going through right now, it's one of the hardest things I do. I'm like, geez, because I can't do, like, normally I just do what I want to do, and that's that. And now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, oh crap, okay, this is off limits. This is off limits. This is off. Like, I gotta, and I'm like, okay, okay, okay. Why am I doing that? Okay, I'm doing that to discipline my body to obey my mind. All right. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But you have to suffer to get through that, and that's part of it. It's like when joining the military when I was in basic training. Um, I went in as infantry, so AIT is tied to your basic training. So at the end of your AIT, you do, I think it's like something like 20-25 mile road march. Takes about a week. You're out, like, sleeping outside. I came down with pneumonia during this. And my
Perfect timing.
right, exactly. Well, and the thing is when you're going through AIT as infantry soldier, you keep the same drill sergeants through your basic and your AIT. You don't change units like you would with another MOS. And so we all had great relationships by this time because we had been locked in this barracks together for 16 weeks. Like there was no one else around. This was it. This was your family now. And we're out there, and one of the drill sergeants pulled me aside and he's like, "You don't look so great. How are you feeling bad?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling great." And he goes, "What's wrong? What's happening?" And I explained to him like what I was dealing with, and he goes, "Okay, yeah, we'll get you to we're going to get you in to see the doctor as soon as we get back. Can you make the last 2 days?" We had 2 days left. I think it was like 10 miles left to Ruck, right? The I
Ugh.
think I think it was like the first the second day we weren't carrying our rucksacks. We were throwing the rucksacks on the cattle truck, so we weren't carrying them. So I only had one more day with the ruck on my back. It was raining. It was nasty. This is Fort Benning, Georgia. It's humid, but it's like the atmosphere is no different than like where I'm from. I'm from Louisiana and Texas. I'm used to it. It's like whatever. So that didn't really bother me that much, but I just was sick. I just couldn't physically, my body was trying to shut down. And I was like, I think I can do it. And that drill sergeant, the one rule you had during this march was you could not fall behind the drill sergeant. That was the one rule. He stood behind me that entire time and walked behind me. And that's not because he's weak or he was showing weakness. That's because men have sympathy for other men that they see dedicated and trying and fighting to get through that, whatever struggle, right? Yeah, it was a little bit easier on me. The marching pace was a little bit easier, but you know what? Every once in a while, he pushed me on the back. He'd say, "Hey, you got to speed it up a little bit. You got to pick up the pace just a little bit. You're falling a little too far behind." And I would, all right. But we were working together, working as a team. He knew I was dedicated to not quitting. Right? It wasn't the point. The point was to find out what your limits were and how far you were willing to push your body, how far you were push yourself. Right? It wasn't to throw you out of the military. It was to get you right up to that point and see that you were too determined to quit. And so that's how you earn respect as a man. It's not this macho Andrew Tate type crap. Like this is just insane. But it's because we have been surrounded by these beta males all our lives. And if you haven't had that real man role model in your life, like I had with my father, and you don't understand the role a man plays in the world and how, he's supposed to put the world on his shoulders, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And there is suffering involved. And anybody that tells you that no, there shouldn't be suffering at all is actually out to get you. They're out to kill you. They're trying to destroy your life. And so it just drives me crazy seeing the kind of atmosphere that we live in when I know that's not the way the world works. I see the way the world works. I see people suffer. I see people struggle. And you know what? If I know that you're trying and you're really dedicated to getting through it, I'm going to help you. I'm going to throw out, $100 here, a couple $100 there to help somebody that I know just needs a hand. They just need a hand up. And they're not turning to government asking for a handout. They're like, look, I'm having a really hard time right now, you know? And I see that trouble. I see that problem. Young couples having car problems. I'll be like, hey man, here's a couple $100. Go fix your car, dude. Like, don't worry about it. But it's because I put myself in a situation where I know what it's like to be without.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying, it's
Sorry,
and that
I'm
thing in life.
ranting.
Oh
You've
no,
got me
you're
on a
fine.
rant here.
You're fine. Actually, I was gonna say he stood behind you because that was respect. He saw that you were struggling, you were tired, you were sick, but you were going to you were going to do your best to get there. So he stood behind you and he gave you the respect because you were showing that you were going to give everything you had. You earned that. And that's something people don't seem to understand is words are just words. My dad told me this when I was little. I got in trouble at school for cussing. I was at school and I said, something, I don't even remember what word it was, but it was enough that they called my dad and they were like, Rachel said a bad word. And he pulled
Mm,
me aside and he's like, listen, There's no such thing as a bad word. It's the intention behind. And some people are going to be offended by it just coming out of your mouth. It's what you mean behind them. You can say the nicest things with a snake's tongue and it be the most vile thing ever. Words are not what holds the power. It's intention behind. It's the way you feel. And I think a lot of people think that you have to get respect because that is just what you do. You respect each other. And there is a level of basic human respect, but there's also a level of earned respect. And that's where we have a difference right now. We have a basic of you have to respect me, yes, as a human, but then they expect the additional respect. That's stuff that you have to earn by showing you're worthy of it. And there is a level of that that has just been kind of forgotten. You showed that you were going to still push through that ruck, even though you felt like dog shit. So he gave you the respect that you deserved by pushing through. You made the effort. If you make the effort, a lot of people are willing to step back and say, hey, man, grab on, I'll pull you forward for a little while because you're showing the effort. I bought my first house at 19. All my friends kept saying, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? I made it a fucking priority. I woke up and I said, I want to have a lifestyle that means I'm going to have to own my own property. I like to have cars that I'm working on. I like to be up late. I like to barbecue at 2 in the morning while having a beer. And I like bully breed dogs. I'm not going to rent for long. People aren't going to like me. So I bought a house. It's not
Hmm.
impossible. You have to make it a priority and make the struggle for it. It wasn't a giant house. It was a starter home. I've moved my way up, but I made sure that I pushed through that. And when I needed help, people respected the flow. They respected the hustle, if you will, and I got help because I tried. The entire point of this society now is to expect a basic level of even ground. And I'm not saying that there should be things that are pushing you down, but that sometimes that even ground is making everybody weaker and not actually raising anybody up. Sometimes you have to slip and fall because if you don't climb up and keep pushing, you never know what you can actually achieve. And if everybody set the same level playing field out the gate without any real struggle and actual earned respect, we will never grow and change as a society. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing just this hotbed of weak sheep that are willing to go right into the slaughter and praise as they go in, and it's sad. It's really sad.
Nothing disgusts me more than weak men. And I'm just being completely honest. It's the most disgusting thing in the world is weak men, as far as I'm concerned. And I remember there was this one time. I don't. I want to say I was like late 20s, early 30s. At a buddy's house. They had just had a party the night before, and we're sitting out in the garage. He had his garage set up with a TV and stuff, so we're just hanging out in the garage, drinking a couple of beers, just bullshitting. And this dude showed up, and this guy shows up, and my buddy goes, "That dude stole that girl's wallet last night." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, he stole that girl's wallet." And I was like, "Why did he steal that girl's wallet?" And he goes, "He's a piece of shit." I was like, "Well, why is he here?" He goes, "Because your brother's about to beat his ass." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I'm sitting there, and my brother hits the guy, and the guy hit the ground. And my brother, he's a big dude. He's a piece of shit too. Don't even get me started on all that. But my brother hit the dude. The dude hit the ground, and he curled up in a ball and started crying. And I was just like, and this girl that was sitting there, it wasn't her. I think it was her wallet that he stole. She looked at me and she just started laughing. And I was like, what? She goes, just the way you looked at him was such disgust. And I was like, well, yeah, that's disgusting. Like, fight back. Like, if you're going to
Do
do something
something.
like, yeah, do something. Don't just lay there and cry like a girl. What are you, 12? Like, get up. You like, be a man, like it's like the most disgusting thing. And I remember one time my son hit his sister, and I about lost my shit. I was like, dude, no. I was like, you want to hit somebody, you hit me. Like, you hit me. We're not going to do that. You're not going to hit your sister. I don't care if she's older than you or not. You're not doing that.
If
You
she's your
know?
sister.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. And he was just like, oh my God, he never hit his sister again. It was just like, no,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. We're not going to play this game. I'm not raising weak men to go around and bully women. That's not what being a man's about. And I've been through two bad divorces, and you know, I'm not always the best person in the world. I haven't always been right in everything I've done. I've made plenty of mistakes, but you know what? I learn from my mistakes. I pick myself up, dust myself off, and I get back to work. Because my mom always told me when I was a kid, look, if you're trying, you're moving forward, you're trying to get better, I got your back. But I'm not going to get down in the corner and weep and cry and sit in a puddle of piss with you. We're not doing this. Like you get up and you act like a man and you take your lumps and you move on. And that's all I've ever done. And so when people are like, "Oh, you've had a rough life," or blah blah blah, I'm like, it was just life. Like I don't look at it as an easy life or as a rough life. It's just life. Life is what it is. Things are tough. You just got to dust yourself off. You got to keep moving forward. And I think if I think if people had more of that perspective, more of that kind of outlook that, hey, you know what? Shit happens. Okay, it happened to me today, and I'm going to move on. And that's that. I don't hold grudges. I don't look at things in that way. It's just like if let's say my wife and I get in an argument, people argue, and you know what? Tomorrow we're not arguing. Yeah, it just is what it is. It's over. It's done. Okay, fine. We both said what we had to say. We got it out of the way. Now let's move on. Like, there's no sense in sitting on that and brewing and stewing on that. I could say any number of things about my ex-wives and the amount of disrespect that I've incurred from them, but it does me no good. It doesn't do me any good. I talked to Kyle about this. The last episode Kyle and I did on parenting. We were talking about just becoming a parent because he's expecting his first child. And I was like, look, man, I was like, shit's going to happen. It's just going to happen. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like, just move on. I was like, you started off with easy mode. You're having a little girl. Girls are easy. They're expensive, but they're easy. Like, wait till you start having boys. That's when the real shit happens. That's when you really got to like buckle down and say, okay, like, what do I got to do to be a parent in this situation? And I was like, boys are rough, and that's a hard life that you chose right there.
Yeah, I have two sons, so I'm outnumbered. It's 3-1 here with two little boys. And when it comes down to that sort of stuff, I think people also have to tie in the fact that a weak man isn't the same as weakness isn't necessarily being inability to show empathy or respect. Like people say weakness means you have none of that. That's incorrect. I think some of the strongest men out there, and something I'm teaching my boys, is the fact that they're both trained in martial arts. They both know how to handle themselves with a gun. They both know how to use all kinds of different axes, knives, tools. Like they're growing up and they are strong, capable men. I know they will be. They also know that they are not to strike each other out of sheer anger unless they have to protect themselves. They know how to empathize with somebody if they're hurt or sick or crying. They know to help a girl, they know how to take care of different things. If
Hmm.
I'm having a rough day and I'm a little cry or weepy, they're the first ones right there to go, "Oh, mom." And like they empathize. That doesn't make them weak. That shows the strength and that sort. I think people say, well, a man that shows those things is weak. And it's like, no, a very strong man can still show and understand those emotions without it letting it become a beta male. There's there's a
Hmm.
line there between being absolutely weak and understanding and empathizing with other people's emotions and understanding that, I could take you down to the ground, but I'm giving the respect of space because you haven't figured your shit out yet. And then if they push it, then you teach them a lesson the way you have to. And I think that is a strength that needs to be shown as well right now, because there's a lot of ease in popping off at somebody, and there's a lot of strength in saying, you need to go figure your shit out, and only having to handle a situation. Like you were saying, when a fight happens, a fight happens. You say what you need to say and you move on. You don't continue to beat it over the head. You don't immediately go to blows. You don't immediately go to end the world sort of a fight. You get through
Hmm.
the argument. You say, "Oh shit, I fucked up." You give each other a hug. You walk away, and that's a strength in itself, is it all of its own. And yeah, parenting, you never know what's going to happen. I had two sons. They're different, and two boys. You think that you may have mirrored up some? No, they're completely different in their own as well. And eh, there's always fighting, and not in the way that everybody's angry. There's just WWE wrestling and everything all the time. So yeah, I agree. I didn't have a girl, but I've heard they're expensive and easier, and boys are crazy. So
Yeah, boys are little barbarians.
yes, they are.
they're they're little heathens. I got four of them.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I have two boys. So and they're we're just entering preteen age. We're
Hmm.
11 and 8. So we're just starting into that sort of stuff. So we'll see. The whole new adventure of that is beginning soon.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't get an instruction book. You just kind of have to figure it out. You're just like, oh, well, but but that's one of the things you mentioned there is the way you deal with conflict. And that's something that was always kind of like, it was just kind of like a saying back in the day is that, men will get in a fight, in a fist fight, and they'll beat the shit out of each other. And then after it's over, they'll dust each other off and they'll go have a beer, and they'll be best
Yeah.
friends after that. Whereas women, they hold grudges forever. And it's like
Yeah.
when you look at society, the society we're living in, it's much more of a matriarchal kind of society that we're living in. This whole like holding grudge and like you can never there's no coming back from a mistake or anything like that. It drives me nuts. I'm like, wait, like he made a mistake. Okay. People make mistakes. Like
Yeah.
you can't hold people accountable. You can't determine a person's worth based upon the worst mistake they've ever made in their life. I've made some pretty shitty mistakes in my life. If I was held to account, if my whole reputation depended on the worst thing I ever did in my life, nobody would ever give me the time of day. That's not the way that you deal with people. You got to give them some room to better themselves, to prove that they're learning from their mistakes, because that's what it's about. You make mistakes in order to learn from those mistakes, in order to not repeat those mistakes. If you're continuously going out repeating the mistake over and over again, that's whenever you have an issue with somebody.
Yeah, accountability, being able to look yourself in the face. I mean, if people held you by your worst mistake and that was what your worth was forever, then it wouldn't matter if you ever grew or was held accountable for anything or if you changed. Because if I was going to be held for the worst thing I ever did, why would I ever decide to do anything else? I'm
Hmm.
already burnt, if you will. So it changes all the growth. I have friends who family friends. I have a long history with people in my life having addiction issues. And I'm the type of person who seems to always give the second chance, the third chance. It's always who I've always been. And it's like, yes, I am that person because, it will stick. And I have a few friends who it has stuck and they are around and they have figured it out and they're doing a lot better.
Hmm.
And I stood by them. And you can't hold them by those worst mistakes. The difference is if they continue to repeat them over and over and over. Eventually, it stops being a mistake and it starts being a habit. And that's when you have to really start looking at how it affects you as well. But I think it's interesting you're talking about confrontation again with men and women. I have majority male friends, and people always say, "Well, why?" And it's like, "Well, because in some cases it's just easier. Like I get along with men. Most of my activities that I like to do generally lean towards that. I like, hunting, fishing, shooting, paintball. I like being
Hmm.
outside and doing these things. So I just naturally ended up with the boys a lot of the time. Then I have sons, so I didn't help. But I always make a joke that I like to be the most irrational emotion person. So if I'm having a rough day and I go to my best friends and they're like, "Oh, come on, Rachel, nut up," I can laugh about it and move on. If I'm in a room full of women, it just feeds and builds and builds
Hmm.
and builds. And you just start feeding off each other until you realize you've just built this nasty bed of gross. Like there's these shows you can watch and you'll watch the men live in a room together in a whole group and they'll fight and they'll yell at each other. And then the next day, like you said, they'll buy each other a beer, they'll move on, they'll laugh. You watch reality show with all these women together, and they will sit there and literally give each other different sorts of laxatives. They miss their dates. They will sit there and try to talk shit about each other. They'll write notes. They'll do, and it's like on and on and on over one thing that was said for years. And it's like, all you've done now is built a pit of despair, resentment, and anger, and you've wasted all that time that you could have been doing other things. So yeah, I've decided it's easier to just be friends with men. It's easier that way for me. I have one really really solid best friend that's female and a few friends that I call really close. They're my mom friends because we have a lot in common, but it's unreal. And now you have so many people that are using that comfort, that emotional compass is the entire way to deal with conflict. And emotions are just that. They're irrational and they come and go because you are feeling them, which is important to check in with, but you can't run off emotion all the time.
Hmm.
It doesn't work that way. There has to be a logic eventually because it'll just continue to implode.
We so like one of the things I always say is I have friends that are just great people, And they're like, I don't want to bring a child into this world. And I was like, that's why the world's going to shit. It's because perfectly reasonable, good people are refusing to have children. You know, it's the psychopaths all spitting out children, and they're raising these psychopaths. And but I don't know. You lived in Washington State, so maybe you'll have a feel for this. It seems to me like honor culture is dying. And so in the South, we have a long history of honor culture when it comes to respecting each other and the way you treat each other. You always know that you're in a situation, you always know that that dude standing in front of you may beat your ass. You know, there's that possibility of conflict, and that kind of keeps people in check. And it's like it feels like there's no these people don't expect there to be any repercussions for their actions. Is it
Yeah,
different up north? Is there less of like an honor culture available or around up there?
I would say so. So I grew up in Washington. I was okay. So I grew up in Colorado Springs, and then I moved. And before I left Colorado, it was still red Colorado. We're
Mm,
talking old Colorado. So I left Colorado, which had that general Midwestern nice, that hold each other accountable. You're going to give each other a general basic of respect, because if not, you may deal with that. There's a repercussion. You're going to have issues. It could be as small as you're not going to be able to trade with that people with their eggs and farm and stuff, all the way up to, like you said, getting your ass handed to you. There's going to be a consequence for your behavior. I got to Washington, and I remember one of the first things, other than being claustrophobic as shit from the trees and being like, oh my God, does it ever stop raining? The big thing I remember the most was the fact that the people were mean, and not mean in the way that you felt like you were going to have to, treat with them respect, but mean, catty, vocally snappy, really manipulative type mean. There is no consequences for running your mouth, because everybody just talks shit all the time, and then they take it so to heart, but nobody wants to step up. The ones that do, strangely enough, go a little bit farther. The ones that are willing to say, no, this is ridiculous, tend to do better. My husband is one who was more of the fuck around and find out type. He isn't the type who was, probably why I caught my eye a little bit. It reminded me a little of that Wild West boy, but
mm,
he was that type. He ended up running shifts in management in a blue collar field, but at the port. Like, that's something you have to work for and have the balls to reach for. These are the types of men that do well out there, because it isn't. The culture out there is completely different. You hide behind your little snippy, manipulative, emotional, grungy talk instead of actually showing a respect, because you know that other person could potentially hand you your ass. So it is a very different culture up there. I felt very emotionally heavy. Like, I felt like there were mind games that needed to be played, and I had to keep ahead of the manipulation all the time versus just living your life. And if you're a good person, then you just do okay. And if you're a shit person, then you probably aren't going to do as well. Like, it wasn't as cut and dry up there. It seemed like there were always mind games. There's a reason that depression and suicide are high up in the Pacific Northwest. There's no sun, and everybody's mean. It's just mean.
That's why heroin was such a problem in the 90s.
Exactly.
What happened in Colorado Springs? I drove through Colorado Springs when I was 19. I was going to Denver for something. I don't remember what I was going to Denver for, but I drove through Colorado Springs. It was beautiful. I loved it. It was like a very down to earth, like small town feel to it. And now everything I hear about it, it's like riddled with meth and crime, and it's almost like turned into like Little Rock.
Yeah, I call it the blue wave. It's that liberal wave. So you if you look at the places that these sorts of things are starting to happen, they lean typically blue, because once again, the people that go there are the people who expect to have assistance, who expect to have a safety net. Colorado has the most beautiful places in the world. It's got all the things you could want. You could hike, but you can still run over to your fast little, place to get your tacos and stuff all in one little area. So they've made it once again a really good resource for a lot of really weak people.
Mm,
So you have these sorts of things. You have people moving in that are going, well, I love to do all these sorts of hobbies that unfortunately tend to lean a little bit to the blue side. And so you have those sorts of people coming in. When I left Colorado, it was still hardworking, down to earth, really solid, just people who wanted to live their life and be left the fuck alone. I
hmm
go home now, and it's grown to the point where Colorado Springs is touching cities that there was nothing there before, because
mm.
people have found a inclusive, free, easy lifestyle in one of the most beautiful places in the world. So what they've done is they've moved in, they've raped the resources, and then they're just spreading out from there doing the same crap. And I think it's just, again, it's ease. It's so easy to move into these places and take over these areas. And people are always talking about progress and movement and changing. And progress really is killing us.
Mm.
It's not progress that we're doing anymore. It's just building a utopia that's going to crash. And it's not a pretty future. And
One
I
of the
think it has
things
to do with that.
one of the things I've always considered is kind of from an economic standpoint, it's almost like human inflation, right? When you look at these
Mhm.
cities, like I lived in Houston for a long time, it was like you don't respect the value and worth of people because there's so many of them. And then when you get out, like I live in a little town, like the town closest to me is like 2,000 people. Like, and everybody's nice and, like there's not a lot. I mean, there's crime, there are drugs here, and I know that that's going
Oh, yeah.
on. I mean, I'm not oblivious to it, but it's like for the most part, people are just kind of like doing their thing and leaving each other alone and pretty friendly with each other. And you don't get that in the cities whatsoever. And I think it's like a human inflation problem
Yeah.
where you pack so many people into a small area like New York City or something like that, and now people don't have any value.
Yeah. And I always call it my big city bitch. Like I moved from Seattle area to a smaller western Nebraska town. And I grew up in Colorado Springs, which I agree. When I was a kid, it was a smaller town type feel. There was a
Mm,
lot more respect. I moved to Washington, mean, 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 mean. But I call it the big city bitch. When I have to go back to the city, you have to change into this. Well, I'll never see you again. So if you step in front of me, it's an immediate screw you. You're going to attack that old lady who took your parking space because you're never going to see her again. Who gives a shit? I'm never going
mm,
to see this woman ever again. The likelihood of stepping on this woman's foot and running into her next week is zero. Doing that here or in your town, you're probably going to see her again. And then you're going
hmm
to have to pay that embarrassment consequence. What if she's with her husband that time? What if she has a grandkid with her who wants to talk shit? You may have to pay a consequence because you don't have it. The lady down the road, who gives a shit? You're never going to see her again if you step on her foot or you take her parking spot because there's 2 million people within the next 2 blocks of Seattle. Who cares?
Right, right.
So I would agree. I think the mass amount of people gives you the ability to hide and be kind of a dick because there's nobody to hold you accountable for the fact that you were an asshole 2 weeks ago. They're not going to remember.
Yeah, well, and then I don't know, you're when you interact with people, it's like you don't even realize you've interacted with them. I don't know because there are so many of them. It's just like they're just shapes. They're not even people.
Yeah.
They're just a moving object that you're just trying to get past. You're not interested in saying hi, how was your day? I know, like I used to go to New York City when I was driving over the road, and I loved the people in New York City that I met. I just thought they were just great people. They're no nonsense. They're just like we don't have time for all the bullshit. But they were all like extremely nice people. I never had any issues in New York City, like running into somebody who was rude or anything like that. And it was like they had this understanding that, you know what, there's so many people around here. It's quite possible I'm going to run into that one dude that's going to pull a gun on me or pull a knife on me
Yeah.
or something like that. So there was like a different type of respect they had in New York City. But I do see what you're saying because it's almost like it's like you're just two ships passing in the night. You don't really even pay attention to the person. Like I couldn't tell you how many times I had people approach me and be like, "Hey, man, remember we met a couple of weeks ago?" Blah blah. I was like, "Dude, I don't know you. No, I don't remember you at all." Like, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I would remember people's names. And I think it was just that being interacting with people in the city, knowing that more than likely I'll never see you again. So, yeah, hi Brian. Oh, it's Bob. Yeah, sorry, Brian, like whatever,
Yeah.
it like doesn't matter, and so yeah, there's this kind of like it's almost inhuman like reality about dealing with people on a basis like that. Like we're not built to deal with people like that.
No, and I think I hate to say it and change a little bit of the topic, but I think when you're talking about just kind of becoming shapes and stuff, it's like when I talk to my friends here that I've made since leaving Washington, and I'll talk about like the fact that you can have apps on your phone that show you where there's human fecal matter, so that way you can go around it. And people look at me like I'm insane. And I'm like, do you not understand the fact that there's so many homeless that you just don't even see them anymore? They're
Mm,
just there. They've become a part of the sidewalk. They just are under the bridges. So now it's like, well, where do I go around their shit? It's become down to where do I not have to deal with them? That's what
mm,
big cities have become. Big cities have become a fecal matter app because instead of trying to help the person or deal with the human, it's I don't want to step in their shit. And I think that that really kind of encompasses where we're at in a general idea when it comes to the big city. I left that area because I didn't want my boys forgetting what it's like to have a childhood where there are other humans. Right. I
right.
remember growing up in the Midwest in the 90s before I went to, up there. And I remember growing up in a smaller town before Seattle ate everything in that
Hmm.
area. Like I had enough of a smaller in community to know what that was like. And I was watching Seattle spread and eat every little town along the way, all of that western
Right.
coast. And then you have Olympia coming from, it's just eating that whole area. And when my youngest school was burnt down during all the rioting and the mess of all that in what was considered a small mountain town, we moved 6 months later because I wasn't going to have them grow up where that became the natural, normal thing. I don't want them to
Right.
miss the beauty of everything because they're just in the city surviving. Like once again, they're just back to surviving and not living. And I
Hmm.
think big cities and a lot of those areas that we're seeing change that people go, what the happened? It's the loss of humanity and basic human respect. They become just a blur and a bother. That lady who took your parking spot is just a bitch who parked there, not somebody who happened to get the spot first, not somebody who may have needed the spot. It's no
Hmm.
longer that. It's I needed that. Get the fuck out of the way.
Hmm. Yeah, it was like I think my parents bought into this whole idea too, because like I was born in a small town in Louisiana, and we moved to Dallas when I was like, I don't know, 5, 6 years old, and they were chasing the economy. They were chasing the money. And my mom, I remember talking to her one time. I was like, "Why did we leave?" And she goes, "I didn't want you to grow up in an area where your only the only job you had available to you was to work in a plant." And I was like, "Yeah, but what's wrong with working in a plant? Like, my both my grandparents worked in a plant, my uncle worked in a plant. They made good money. They provided for their family, and it was just like there was this lie being told that you had to chase the income. You had to chase it, and you had to leave your extended family in order to find it. And I think a lot of people are now starting to see the repercussions and how bad that was for society and for their family.
Yeah. And I think that we've lost a lot of respect for the, like you were saying, like your uncles worked at the plant and everybody did that, like the heritage lines of things. Like
Hmm.
when I met my husband in high school, I was a senior, he was in college. So we weren't both in high school, but we were really close. So
Mm,
there's a
mm,
little bit
yeah.
of it, but he was working and he was working in concrete, which anybody that's worked in concrete knows that is a thankless, hard job. That is one of those
Nasty
jobs
job.
that just sucks. And he worked in concrete when I first met him. And, I think, and people gave me shit, oh, you just met a guy who's working concrete. He didn't go to college. Well, it's like, well, he was putting himself through college while working concrete, but nobody wanted
Right.
to hear that. They just heard that he was working concrete. And I chose to be with somebody that chose to do that. And it's like, I think we've lost respect in the fact that some people work in the plant, they work in the concrete, they work in those
Hmm.
places, not because they're stuck doing that, but because they either enjoy it, it worked out for them, or it's a heritage type thing. Everybody that I like, all of his uncles, half of his cousins, half of his dad, half of them all worked at the same concrete plant right out of high
Hmm.
school because it was guaranteed, it was good money. It taught them how to something they could use later. It taught them an actual usable skill, which people seem to forget. If you don't have an actual usable skill, someday that can bite you in the ass. Like, I don't care what you want to say, but if you can't do something like that, it could someday really be a major issue, or you're going to continue to pay the people that know how to do it. But
Hmm.
I think we've lost a respect in the hands-on jobs and what that means and what we have to do all those levels. I mean, people chase progress. They're always chasing progress, chasing the best and the easiest and the newest. And it's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of hands-on jobs that there is just no easier way. And that should have a lot more respect, because those are the ones that we always need too. Those are the ones that keep the world running, and people
Right.
chase the progress and the money when sometimes that's worse. It's not actually going to pay out in the end. So many people go to school because that's what you're supposed to do, and then aren't able to actually use their degrees or make anything with them, because they chased that dream and that progress that didn't actually pan out because everybody did that. So now we're just inundated with the same people.
Right. Well, and that's what I've told my boys too, is was like they're trying to figure out what they're going to do as far as, life choices goes. They're all in their early 20s. And one of my sons got a job, was last year before last, something like that, working as an electrician's helper. And I was like, and he enjoyed it. He's like, I love it. And I was like, well, then stick with it. I was like, because everybody
Yeah.
needs an electrician. Like, you're never going to be without work. I was like, so you like chase that trade. Don't worry
Yeah.
about going to college. Don't worry about all that other stuff. You found an industry that you really enjoy that is going to pay you enough to live. You could start your own like contracting service, become a contractor, a journeyman, go out there and make 40, $50 an hour while your buddies have $100,000 in college debt that they're trying to pay off by working at Starbucks. Like,
Yeah.
just do what's best for you. If you like it, you can make good money doing that. Do it. Because I remember growing up, I would go back to Louisiana every summer and spend time with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and all that. And my entire childhood, all I ever wanted was to move back. That was it. That's
Yeah.
all I ever wanted. I didn't care about pursuing a career or anything like that. I just wanted to be back there because I lived in Dallas, I lived in Houston, and my parents did the best they could to provide for me. It started off rough, it started off bumpy. My mom would go days without eating, and by the time I was in high school, they owned a house, and we lived in a nice suburban area, but I always wanted to be in the country. I always wanted to be away
Yeah.
from all the people. And that was really my passion. And so when my parents sold the property I'm on now, I was like, I'll buy it. I don't care. I'll
Yeah.
buy it. I don't care what it takes. I'll buy it. I'll figure it out. And so I did. My wife had moved from South Africa. And when she moved here, she had told me, she goes, I love cities. She goes, I lived in London for 2 years. I lived in Pretoria. I love the city. And I was like, I hate the city. And so she moved in and we lived in Katy, just outside of Houston. After like 2 years, she was like, I can't stand this place. I've never been in a place like this. There's no soul. It's heartless. It sucks. And I was like, yeah, welcome to the city. What'd you think I was talking about? And she was like, this isn't what it's like in the cities I've lived in. She goes, I can't do it. And so we ended up moving out here. I took a job driving over the road, and sacrificed time of us spending together so that we could buy this place and get set up out here. And now I don't have to be going over the road. Now we're in a situation where I can be home every night, and I'm only working 4 days a week, and so, like, things work out, but you just got to decide what you want to do and you pursue that. Like you were talking about buying a house when you were 19 years old. You decide what you want and you pursue that. And it's great when you have a partner in your life that sees your vision and chases that dream with you.
Yeah. And like when we just had our oldest, and we were between, well, we're gonna have more kids and where we're gonna move. There's a whole big thing when you've had
Mm,
your first baby, all kinds of ups. Well, my husband got offered a position to run cranes at the port instead, sit and just run cranes all day.
mm,
And the pay was about the same. There really wasn't much of a change. There were slight differences. And it came down to the fact that he did not want to be caged up in a box all day. So he said worked concrete, and then he started working welding, and then he moved into working, mechanics on cranes. And in the end, he chose to stay working with his hands outside and stuff. And it's like that's perfectly fine. There should be
right.
no disrespect in the fact that he decided, you know what, for me, being trapped inside of a little box all day sounds like hell. So he
Mm,
couldn't do it. So he didn't. And we teach our boys that a lot. Like my oldest wants to be a Major League Baseball player. And I'm like, if that is your dream, I will do everything I can. That's a hard road, kid.
yeah.
Like that is a hard road. That's not something that's going to be easy. And I've talked to him about it. And I said, the realization is you should find something you love as well, just in case, but I will do everything I can to get you there. And you have to be willing to chase those dreams and not go the easy path. He's picked something that's not easy. He's picked things that are going to be harder. Okay, people might give him shit for that. That's the way it is. My husband didn't want to live in a little box or work in an office, so he didn't. Feel like, well, you chose to work concrete. Yeah, he started there. Your son is working with an electrician as basically ground up electricity. Who knows?
Hmm.
Maybe he'll decide that's his passion and he'll be one of the best electricians in his area. You
Hmm.
can't stifle it because it's not the progress that everybody expects it to be. There's so many people that just let it go, something they love because of the expected path, and that's sad. It really is. And there's nothing less about you for wanting to work with your hands. I hate that. I hate that stigma so much. I tell my
Right.
boys all the time, don't let someone tell you you have to go to school and be these certain things because there's so many other options on how to make a living and how to make yourself happy. So don't follow the path that's put in front of you just because. I moved 1,500 miles away from where I thought I'd die because I didn't like the way things were going. And I picked up and moved 6 months later.
Hmm.
Sometimes you just have to go, you know what? This
Yep.
isn't working and make the call.
Right. Well, we've been going an hour, a little bit over an
Yeah.
hour, and I've learned a lot about you. And
Yeah.
so you like pit bulls, you like
Yeah.
guns, you like men. You're a terrible mother.
I know. I'm horrible doing
You
a
won't let
bad
your you
job.
can't you don't like Bigfoot? Like what is wrong with you?
It's been nice. We all get to talk so professional all the time in the chat. We pass through at work stuff, and it's nice. I'm getting to actually know everybody personally. So I'm enjoying getting to do these.
This is awesome. Yeah, for sure. Well, plug anything you got to plug where people can find what you're working on, what and all that good jazz.
So I am working with the Institute. I put out my first article with you guys, with us, I guess, all of us. So I'm working with the Libertarian Institute. I guess you say the full thing. I'm looking at possibly starting my own little podcast project with them where we're going to be talking about personal stuff in life and hanging out and just kind of shooting the shit. So I'm kind of getting a feel on how that's going to go. Other than that, I've been working really hard on getting Provoked, Scott's new book, into college campuses. So I've been
Oh,
working really
cool.
hard with finding professors and things that align with that, trying to see if I can get anyone to take the bait a little bit and push forward on that. I'm also the chair of the Libertarian Party of Nebraska, so that's always a adventure and a half. But
Publishing, the first time you get published at the Institute is probably one of the weirdest experiences because I remember the first article I ever published was about 9/11. And I was talking about how I was in basic training when 9/11 had occurred and how strange it was being in basic training. And Scott published it. And then he was like, all right, it's up today. And I went and looked, and the article before mine was by Ron Paul, and the article after mine was by Lou Rockwell. And I was like, I don't belong here.
okay, the day mine posted, it had Keith above mine, and then it had one by Kyle below mine, and I was like, "How is it? How am I
Right.
sandwiched between people that I read to get to this path?" And mine was all about empathizing with your enemy and understanding that they're humans too, and showing basic respect. So it was interesting to see that in the middle of all of the differences. So
Right.
yeah, it was pretty cool. I popped open a little bit of whiskey that night and gave myself a little shot because I
Why
had gotten
not?
some pressure. Yeah, I gotten some pressure to write one. Everybody's like, "You have a voice, give it a shot." And I was like, "Screw it." So I'm gonna do it again. I have another one that I'm working on, and I'm just gonna keep seeing what happens and have fun with it. So
Cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to end the recording.
All right.